Hello, hello, my podcast peoples. This is estate planning and asset protection attorney Leslie Marenco, bringing you having fun with death and taxes. Today, I am once again blessed with a wonderful guest. Vanessa, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Vanessa Vasquez de Lara from the Vasquez de Lara Law Group, and I am the preeminent family law attorney in Miami.
I love
preeminent
that.
as I define it, so it could mean anything.
And today we are going to be talking about Howard Hughes, because when I thought of what is a good estate to break down with you, Vanessa, I thought, okay, which one of these is celebrity estates, which a lot of them have family law issues, family law concepts, some type of intersection between family law and estate planning. But this one seemed like such a shit show and has complex issues going on because there were so many different people coming forward saying certain things that I'm like, who can really cover all of these things?
I can help.
Well, Mr. Hughes, I'll give a breakdown like we always do on the podcast to give you a little bit of background. Maybe you saw this movie. I never saw this movie.
I think I saw the movie
Aviator.
with Leonardo DiCaprio.
I need to apparently watch the movie, but I'm of course what stood out to me the most when I was like reading up on this guy was like he was the richest person in the world from 1960 to 1980. I was like, oh my God, like really? Like
Pre-Bezos, pre-Gates, pre-Musk.
Right. Yeah. Right. And I mean, he did inherit some wealth from his dad and he inherited, but he clearly turned that into like whole other things with like, I don't know, a Hollywood production movie studio. But then most notably, he got into the aviation industry. And I guess that's where a lot of
like everything, when you get in the beginning.
You start making money and you can go. And then he invested in casinos. He invested a shit ton of land in a bunch of states. I was like, man, this guy was all over and then bought Trans World Airlines. Like it just, I was like, holy shit. He really, I mean, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, for sure.
Serial entrepreneur. Serial entrepreneur.
Diversification at its best.
And so he ends up dying in 1976. He was 70 years old. And as far as anybody knew, he wasn't married at the time. But then the plot thickens, right?
Always.
What I thought was interesting, too, was the first two marriages that were the only ones that a court has decided were legit, to Miss Rice and Miss Peters. Apparently, they could care less because they got legitimately divorced, legitimately married and legitimately divorced, and never had anything else to say, never made a claim against the estate, everything well documented. And that goes to show you, when things are well documented, people don't come up with
there you go.
Crazy shit, right? Apparently there was no will, and we're not going to get too much into like the silly Mormon will that magically got mailed to some church and was giving all the money to the gas station attendant. We will not be discussing that on this podcast. But I thought that was just like, really? People try anything, man.
Of course.
Anything. Like, what did this guy just, I don't know, would give him gas? And you're like, I should be in this will.
Yep.
Insane. So starting with the one we're going to talk about first is Miss Terry Moore. And she had said, now apparently she was also quite famous in her own right. She was an actress, and that she and Howard had gotten married secretly aboard the yacht.
Bum, bum, bum.
In international waters around 1949-ish or so. Ooh. And that it was the ship's captain that married them. And I mean, he's a captain, right? So that sounds perfectly legitimate.
Perfectly.
You know, she was like, why would I think this is anything wrong with this? The ship captain did it. And that the reason they did this at sea was that because he was a very private person. And he didn't want to register that anywhere. He didn't want anybody knowing his business. He didn't want anything. Yeah. Any public record whatsoever of this marriage, which is why she was saying, I am the legitimate wife and we've never gotten divorced. Yeah. But there's not a whole lot of evidence that I can provide to you, Judge, as she claims to be surviving spouse. So I think one of the places we could start this conversation is thinking of our clients, right? And this is Miami. We have a very international culture here and people from all over the world, right? Yep. And this concept of if you're married somewhere else, and we've gotten this question, like, do I need to get remarried here? I was married, let's assume legitimately, in Chile. We're here now, and I want to make sure that nobody can say that I'm not married. So does anything need to happen here to domesticate that marriage?
Nope. Once you get married somewhere, you're married everywhere. So that's not a problem. What we usually see, though, is more having to do with divorces somewhere else than marriages somewhere else. Those
That
tend
may
to
or may
create
not happen. That may or may not have happened.
Right. So, we actually get more calls about people that got divorced somewhere else but weren't there when they got divorced. Right. So like in the Dominican, you call it un divorcio al vapor, which is
Okay.
which is un divorcio al vapor, which is literally, and Mark Anthony did this, I believe, with one of the exes. I'm not sure which one. I don't think it was J-Lo. And it's literally where you are able to file paperwork and get the divorce. You don't do anything else. So you don't deal with necessarily the equitable distribution or the alimony or the children's issues.
But what do you say? We're going to deal with this later?
Yes.
You say,
It's like
I
a
don't want to be married to
bifurcated.
you anymore. We need a quick and dirty divorce, and we will worry about...
So that one is that specific thing. But
Interesting.
generally, it is a thing in Latin countries where you can get divorced if you got married there, even though you're no longer there. This causes problems for people in the U.S. because although it can be recognized as a legitimate divorce, immigration won't recognize it. So if you do that and then you marry again and then you're like, hey, I need to, request my spouse, you can't because immigration will not accept a divorce where you were not physically in the country when you got divorced. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So then we've got those
Physical
cases.
presence is what that turns on?
Right. So because they're like, we don't know if the proper jurisdiction belonged there. We don't know if the people knew about
why
it.
did the Dominican Republic, why were they
Exactly.
able to adjudicate this at all?
Exactly. So we actually get 1 or 2 cases a year where we have to help people re-divorce and remarry so that they can request their current spouse for immigration purposes. So we don't get too many who are concerned about, is my marriage legitimate, which it is, 100%, as long as you got some kind of paperwork.
Something. A witness. I don't know.
And actually, so Florida no longer has common law divorce, but we will recognize it if you come from somewhere that does have common law marriage. So we will not recognize common law marriage, but if you come from somewhere and you have a legitimate common law marriage from where you came from, you are actually able to use that as a basis to get a divorce in Florida. But you have to be able to prove whatever the requirements were for the common law wherever you came from. So a lot of Latin countries do have common law marriage. So if you're able to demonstrate that you meet the requirements and that you were common law married wherever you were,
That's wild.
you are able to get a divorce here.
And the whole, and we were going to get into common law marriage because, of course, certain ladies were going to come forward saying, I'm married to this guy because we
live together.
We lived together and people knew, right? And, well, the problem was they could never come up with anybody that knew or even any evidence that they lived together because apparently Mr. Hughes is kind of like me. So we are going to talk about more common law marriage, but imagine, so even like here in Florida, so somebody's from... whatever. What is one of the jurisdictions that have common law marriage these days? Colorado or something? One of these weirdos.
So U.S. states, I don't remember, but a lot of Latin American countries have it. I think Argentina has it. I know the Dominican Republic has it. So, there's a good number of Latin countries where women are more protected than in Florida, and they do receive common law spouse rights.
And so is a Florida judge going to make the decision as to whether you were common law married there? Under those rules?
Basically.
And all of that seems very factual, right? Of like, did you guys live together? Did you hold yourselves out to be married?
You'd have to potentially bring in the expert that
Mahina?
knows the laws
Like,
from over there, 100%. We don't get it very often. It's usually like not something that, that comes up that ends up in trial, because most family law cases, the reality is that most of them are going to settle. So we haven't had to take one to trial yet. Right. But yeah, you'd have to bring an expert to testify that these people are common law married based on over there, and go from there.
Wow. Yeah. Because that, as we always say in the probate world and the estate litigation world, the more factual something is, the more expensive it is to litigate and the harder it is to prove.
Yeah.
Not for nothing, this lovely Miss Moore over here is having a great time, but she couldn't even produce this boat captain, because she's like, whether the boat captain...
I forgot his name, I forgot the boat name, I forgot where I was.
Secrecy, he was not allowed to ever talk about it.
At the end of the day, my understanding is that a boat captain has authority to solemnize a marriage, at least in Florida, but you have to have a marriage license. So without a marriage license, you are still unmarried. Like there's no such.
Oh, really?
Right? Yeah. So I mean, you in Florida, you need a marriage certificate. If you don't have that, you can have a big fancy wedding
On the boat.
You're still not married.
On the yacht.
On
and
a
then
yacht.
you gotta come back here and
On
you
a
gotta go file
yacht, at
paperwork.
Vizcaya, wherever you want. But if there's no
Con cualquiera
marriage
que marry you.
license, you're SOL.
Got it. Got it. Well, poor Miss Moore could not really come up with any piece of paper, any human person that also saw this. And even though, because there was a whole lot of talk about how, because she was very articulate, apparently compared to the others, and always had the same story. At least she kept her story straight.
She was
throughout
consistent.
on TV. She wrote a book about,
Wow.
their marriage and how the world is not accepting it. I thought like boa. I mean, this one
For
was
real.
this one was trying hard.
Sounds like maybe she made her money, in other ways.
Well,
And
Funny enough.
maybe not, like the riches, pero I would think that the book sold well at the time.
and there was some talk that she might have gotten something substantial, not from the estate, but from one of the side companies that. So I think someone in the estate was like, okay, we don't want
Let's-
this lady to be
let's wrap it
considered
up.
an heir, but this has got to stop,
Yeah.
right? So get one of the million corporate entities to pay her out so we can all move on from this because
you
it's
go.
still in the news every day while she's giving whatever interviews with Barbara, whatever, with
Yeah.
somebody that's around at that time.
Okay.
Whatever the news used to look like.
Nice.
So I thought that was very interesting because she did kind of get herself.
She got herself a small payday.
She
Small
got her
payday.
something.
Yeah.
There. So it wasn't necessarily the issue at sea. If you get married on your yacht, everybody, you have to come back and you now need to file paperwork.
So, I mean, you got to do it before, right? So you got to do your marriage. You got to have your marriage certificate before you solemnize it. You can't solemnize it and then get married.
Look
so,
at
So the
that.
priest can't, marry
Clearly,
you.
I've never been married.
And then
I'm like,
you
you have to get what?
Right.
A paper before?
You got to get a papelito
a
first.
papelito primero.
And then whoever solemnizes it signs your papelito that they solemnized it. And then you deposit that with the local clerks. So if any of those steps are missed, if you don't get the license, if you don't get it solemnized, or you don't submit it, you are not officially married. So it happens with enough regularity that people will do step one and
what
step
Leslie
two.
just thought, which was let me go get married, and then I'll get some papelito to
No.
fix
It
this.
happens a lot where people get the papelito. They have the priest or pastor or boat captain, and
Oh,
then
but
never
then they
turn it
don't-
in.
Oh, that makes sense.
And that one of all the of the three steps, that one is the easiest one to fix. Because ultimately, if you find it and you have the
How long does this
papelito,
papelito last?
I mean you're required to turn it in 30 days. But
Vamos a
if you thought he turned it in and he thought you turned it in
I love that.
and nobody turned it in.
It was on the honey-do list and he didn't do it.
Exactly. So if you never turned it in, but you have it, you may be able to get the court to and you acted as if you were married. You may get the court to recognize it because everybody relied on it.
Oh, even after the fact. Okay.
Right. So if you don't do it, the presumption is you're not married.
Right.
But you can argue that in the equities that everybody relied on it, and you can show, look, we did all the steps, we just accidentally forgot to send it in. You may be able to get it recognized.
Oh, wow.
May. Judge specific.
Again, factual. Oh,
Facts matter.
even judge specific. How much they're buying into this bullshit.
So, and then even if you don't find the papelito, you may, but if you did all the steps. So if you can't show the priest that married you, if you can't show that you got a papelito, because there is a record of the papelito being gotten.
Yeah.
The clerks do track when they issue the certificate, if it came back or not. So if you got the certificate and you can show, look, here's the pictures of the priest marrying me, but we lost the papelito on the way to the honeymoon, and we didn't realize that we needed to, whatever excuse you come up with. But if you relied on it, you acted as
My
married.
brain immediately goes to don't worry, mi amor, I'll file a papelito. And the papelito, lo and behold, is never filed.
And that's why.
Tomado.
And that's
By then, you already
why.
want to kill him for the reasons.
If
I
somebody to make sure, and that's why if there was a reliance and somebody maybe
know. This
didn't
is
want to submit,
fraud, man. This is straight up fraud.
because the parliament said these are the kind of issues that we typically don't see like in a 1-year marriage where, I mean, what's really the damage? But in a 20 or 30-year marriage where you're like, what do you mean we never turned in the papelito? Yes.
Oh, no.
So then the court, I mean, the
No.
family law court is a court of equity. So they're not going to say to a 30-year wife, well, he screwed you 30
He
years
lost a
ago.
papelito, wink, wink. So
Exactly.
we're leaving you with nothing.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
So then they try to, fix the situation.
Wow. Okay, that's not a place I thought this conversation was going because I did not know that. All right. I mean, I could see so many different, and imagine if all of this happens, I guess because you're looking at it from a divorce context. People are coming to you later going, hey, I want to get divorced. And then opposing counsel springs on you. There was no papelito, so they're
were
not
never
married,
married.
so don't worry about it. And then you have to go prove the affirmative.
Yeah.
I'm now thinking about this in the probate context of blended family or whatever, where things like this are weaponized very, very often. Whether someone's been married multiple times and they didn't get a divorce or they did or whatever, everybody has
We
a
had
story.
that situation.
Right.
We had a situation like that where he forged the divorce papers and then calls her and tells her, hey, we're divorced. And she's like, how's that possible? And so she contacts us. We contact the attorney who represented him and said, hey, those papers he gave you were forged. They're like, oh my goodness. So they quickly agree to unfile them and set aside the divorce. And we start the case all over again. But in the interim, he remarried. And so he owned a property with my client. And then he owned a property with, second fake wife. And, sadly enough, he passes away before the litigation finishes. And ultimately, my client's property wasn't his husband and wife because they bought it before they got married. So she didn't inherit outright. And the second property was his husband and wife, but
Even though they weren't
but he
husband
was
and
a
wife.
wife. So it ended up going into probate litigation.
Absolutely.
And it ended up resolving. But yeah, it ended up in probate court.
Oh my God. I mean, you do, well, that's like all the scenarios in one. Because usually, I mean, what we see on our end is, of course, like, whatever, dad died, he's currently married to surviving spouse calls to start the probate or figure something out. And all of a sudden, the kid's position is they were never married because he never divorced my mom, or I know she never divorced whoever in her country. Right? And all of a sudden this becomes like a huge mess of trying to figure out and trying to get documentation and now somebody's passed away. I mean, we had it once where like the ones that actually called us were like the nieces and nephews of someone that had passed away because the new spouse was also so old that there's no way she was going to be able to deal with any of this. And they were like, when all of these allegations started coming forward, that dad had never divorced first wife. Dad had already been married so many times. And so basically all of those marriages would be void anyway.
Wow.
But he actually divorced number 2, divorced number 3. So there was documentation of marriage to number 2, divorce of number 2. Marriage of number 3, divorce of number 3. Our client was number 4. And they like the kids.
And she wasn't concerned that she was number 4. I mean,
Yeah.
Okay.
And by then I think he was old and tired because they just, he died 40 years later and they were still married. And the kids from the first marriage were the ones
like,
that
hey.
showed up and they were like, he never divorced my mom. Like, he's not married to you at all.
Wow.
And this,
how interesting.
And that one was quite a fact gathering, whatever, because we were like, oh shit. Before the kids from number 2 and number 3 pop up going, wait a minute, and have something to say, let's go pull all of those records and we could easily find those. But divorce from number 1 was not in this country. Marriage and divorce from number 1 was somewhere else. Ooh. So, right, around and around we go. And this gets weaponized quite a bit. I think like as soon as people kind of know these rules and it's like they heard a rumor once somewhere and they realize that could invalidate, surviving spouse's claims or whatever it may be. people really grab onto that. And
We've had it happen in divorces too, where it's like, oh, she never got divorced before we got married. And so our marriage has been invalid this whole time.
and
These
then
then they
do that though.
and then we might get papers from Cuba, and then there'll be allegations that the papers from Cuba are fake, and that that's not what they look like, and there's supposed to be a number here, and there's supposed to be a number there, and yeah.
Are there like Cuban legal experts like that come forward going, that's legit and that's not? I mean, like, what in the world?
I mean,
are
that
we
is
even-
exactly what you have to get. Is expert testimony say that's not a legitimate paper.
And I'm
Or you have to
sure-
hire an attorney in Cuba to go like look at the records and like confirm, hey, that page number doesn't exist.
that book and page. No,
That book and page is not there. Imagínate.
no, I cannot. So poor Miss Moore and the other one definitely couldn't prove any of their claims. And then all of these people started coming forward with this common law marriage, saying that they were married previously in places like, okay, so maybe some of these places are still Iowa, Kansas, Rhode Island, etc., where common law marriage did exist and might still exist at the time.
Yeah.
But we had the same problem here, it looks like, because in every single one of these cases, they all had like the same story, right? Like, we were married in secret. Like, there wasn't...
Everything was in secret.
Whatever magazine, at the time for like the celebrities.
I have to imagine that
there
like
were no pictures.
he was just sleeping around the entire country.
All these women that...
and making so many promises and like, no, mamita, you're my only one.
I love you.
Yeah.
But
and
I love you.
It's crazy.
And don't worry, we're married. Like, common law marriage. Like,
Don't worry, I'm not defiling you. We're married in common law.
yes. And the whole thing was like, some of them said, hey, we even use, because they would come up with paperwork and it would be like pseudonyms, right? And they'd be like, no, but he wouldn't use his real name because
goodness,
he
'cause
doesn't
he was
want
so
the
private.
tabloids,
Yeah.
right? To get a hold of whatever. And like, he's such a private
So
man.
basically, he was the best cheater
I'm like-
on this side
I'm
of the.
But the judge in this court, in probate court, had to go like one by one through all of these, because you can imagine how many people came forward with either the common law marriage thing or no, we did get married, but there's no real documentation, and nobody will come forward because they're sworn to secrecy and whatever. And the judges had to go one by one and say, no, I'm sorry, no, not enough, no, moving on.
He must have been twirling in his grave. Not
then
just turning in
there's-
his grave, but twirling.
It's almost like the court decided there was going to be like 3 classes of potential spousal claims, right? The ones where you claim to have actually been married. The second one, you claim to have actually been common law married, but there was never any piece of paper. And the third one was all the promises that were made that they would be taken care of and blah, 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 blah. And so there was just a bunch of these.
Did anybody have anything? Like,
No.
checks?
Like-
Like, were they getting all paid in cash? Like, what is happening?
This is just, and any of them, like over 600 people came forward in this estate in general,
Wow.
whether it was about being a potential
A
surviving
spouse.
spouse or being long lost brother, long lost whoever. It's almost like the Prince estate where there's like 30 people coming forward claiming to be siblings and whatnot.
My goodness.
And the other complication was this guy lived in a whole bunch of different places. Like, so you're trying to drag in, like, oh, in that jurisdiction, he promised me something, and maybe in that jurisdiction, that would give me some type of equitable
Claim,
relief or
yeah.
claim. Even if I'm not surviving spouse, I would get something else. And this judge probably, I'm sure, had enough of this insanity, quite like the Prince judge, that was like, enough is enough. I need DNA tests all now, like submitted by this date, or we're done, right? Like,
Yeah.
Like there is
Makes sense.
there is a great, as we know, like the law says many things, but a judge that lives in the real world and attorneys that work in the real world, sometimes hard for a client to hear, are the ones that adjudicate these cases, that try and adjudicate these cases. And if a judge is already like hasta aquí with all of this nonsense, and you're the last idiot to make a claim, and maybe you had the one witness, that's not going to be good enough either at this point. Like, I don't believe any of you. Get out of my courtroom. And I can really imagine that some of that started happening here, of like, even because I was like, it's kind of crazy that none of them would be able to come up with 2 friends
For real.
and whatever.
Somebody helped you sneak out.
Somebody
helped you sneak in.
Yeah.
You had to have written in some diary. Like, come on now.
I like that. Because when you start thinking about what are the factual things that a lot of people try to get away with a lot. And I think it's getting harder and harder to get away with things.
No, yeah. I
Right?
mean,
But even back
nowadays,
then-
there's so much documentation for everything.
Even back then, you're absolutely right.
I asked,
like, you didn't
I
write
asked
the
my
diary,
kids. I
like-
asked my kids, "Where are you?" And I know the answer to that question before I ask it. I can check the location of their Tesla. I can check the location of their phone. So
Tesla.
I know the location before I ask the question. So don't be trying to.
I mean, your mom is a lawyer. I guess I hope they learned that early on. Like, there's no point in me like lying to her. She
You
knows.
gotta come up with a good excuse for where you are, but you best not lie to me about where you are.
Absolutely, I love that. And even then, I kind of love your journal.
No, yeah, I mean, we tell our clients that's a thing that could be used as evidence in family court. If you are writing down on a journal things that are happening, if you write them down as they happen, so
Yeah.
not like you went back at the start of your divorce and wrote, you know,
Sure.
like a book, but if you can demonstrate that you've been writing
Contemporaneous.
in this journal on a regular, recurring basis, you can actually use that journal as evidence, during a trial or a hearing for the truth of what you wrote down, because you were doing it, keeping contemporaneous records, and as the record keeper, you're able to testify about that. So we tell people, if things are happening, if he's acting a certain way, if he's doing certain things, if your kids are doing certain things or saying, I mean, you can't bring the hearsay in, but
Right.
but your impressions about the things that they're saying, and you're writing and keeping those, in a journal, whether it's a digital journal or a physical journal, you can actually use those to refresh your recollection when you're testifying, and you can use them as evidence when you come to court.
And no, none of them had any journals or anything.
I mean,
that I could
oye,
see
like,
that,
come
nada,
on, bro.
Nada. Like, or the judge just like wasn't having any of this and didn't look at the journal, so it's in none of the records, right? Like, this was never allowed to be entered into evidence as far as we can see.
Yeah.
There wasn't even what I thought of, because he was so into this, like, not living in one place and living at hotels and what have you. I mean, I feel like people that work in hotels are like up for sale. You know what I mean? Like that bellboy.
But that was like a different era,
you know?
I think, where you could actually, like swear people to secrecy, and they would
And they
not sell,
respected it?
and they would not sell your video of you beating down your girlfriend in the elevator. It was a different. It was a different era. I feel like, like the service people help keep your secrets.
They did sell the
JFK
video
in
to
Maryland.
the-
Come on now, like.
That's true.
There's definitely like things have changed. Things are definitely different in that, that tattletailer, can you buy somebody off?
would say, la economía se ha puesto dura. Like, you know what I mean? Maybe that's
Like, I think people protected other people,
Dignity
especially like famous people, or, like there was just more of that, I don't know, like that star quality where you would keep secrets. Now it's like everybody's for sale, and you just gotta find the highest bidder.
yeah. No, but you might even be like going into it thinking that, like, hey, I'm gonna work at this hotel because let's see what good shit I could get. Like, yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, in this estate, it ended up being like gazillion years later when all of this was gonna be decided, and there were so many issues here of like domicile. I mean, there's just so many other issues that we're not gonna talk about. But it ends up going to 22 like long lost cousins. Because this judge had probably enough, didn't really believe any of these women, even
And
poor
struck all
Miss
the
Moore, who
claims.
decided to start writing a book and get herself on
She
a
got
lot
her
of-
money from her book. Don't worry.
She got money from the book, and there's a rumor going around the internets that she got about $1 million back in those days from one of the companies. So she got something. She got something.
She was doing-
Unconfirmed.
so it sounds like
allegedly.
she had the best claim out of all the bad claims.
It does. At least, like, she was consistent, and she was famous enough to get herself on TV, talking about it all the time, about how much she loved him. Even though
They
judge...
spent like 30 years married and not living
Sure.
anywhere together. Got
And
it.
then there's all these women after her that are like, what do you mean? He was married to me, common law, in another state. Like, what are you talking about? You know?
Right.
So this is all kind of very entertaining, I'm sure. I can just, like, we have, as you know, very few probate judges in Miami, and they each have their own special personality.
Yeah.
And you could see how some of these things in front of those judges would just be like,
Not fly.
oh man.
Not fly at all.
Like we're not doing this. We're just so not doing this. Get out of my courtroom. So it ended up being split amongst these 22 cousins who really didn't get the gazillions of dollars, because this is the equivalent of billions of dollars back in those days, what he died with, for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And they were talking about how, like, when you do come up with witnesses, what are the standards for that? And tell, because you're a real trial lawyer and you guys really actually, and we know that most things settle, and we know, but there are a lot of lawyers, I think on the family law side, on the probate side too, that the second something's going to get heated up and something is actually going to go to anything more than a basic evidence you're hearing, they know they're not going to continue on the case, and they're going to need a little bit of help knowing those rules of evidence you just mentioned, you know? And so for the podcast audience that is not just attorneys, this idea of who is a reliable witness and who makes those decisions. Is there a jury most of the time? Is it only the judge? How do the mechanics of that look in a trial?
So officially, the only family law matter that could be heard by a jury is a paternity case, when you're establishing that somebody is the father, the legal father. Although I've never seen it, and I've been practicing like 22 years. But it exists in the code. It is available.
So if you believe a jury would be more sympathetic, you would request this?
I don't know when
Nobody
you would
does
possibly.
this.
Nobody's done
Nobody
it.
does
No,
this.
I've never heard of it even happening, but it exists. You learn about it in law school. You learn about it studying for the bar, but it's not an actual reality. Otherwise, every single family matter is heard by a judicial officer. Generally, it's going to be your family division judge. In our circuit, in our division, we also have general magistrates. And general magistrates work similar in probate and family. They can only hear things that are referred to them. So in Miami-Dade, you literally have to get each motion referred. So there's a motion for temporary relief. The judge will refer it to the general magistrate. If nobody objects to the general magistrate, then the general magistrate has the ability to hear it. If one of the parties objects within 10 days, then the case goes back to the judge and that motion has to be heard by the judge. That's a little bit different in other counties. I only practice in Miami-Dade and Broward, and Broward will actually refer the whole case instead of referring one by one things. So you can actually, and they will refer petitions for divorce. In Miami-Dade, you do not refer a petition for divorce. They only refer individual motions, but not full-fledged divorce trials. They will refer paternity petitions for paternity, but not for divorce. Why? I don't know. The rules allow for it. There was a pilot program at one time where they were trying to see whether that was something that they would have wanted to do. It did not continue, so they stopped that. And so a divorce trial will always be with a judge in Miami, but it can be with the general magistrate in Broward. So that's kind of the mechanism of how that is actually going to go forward in court. Reliable witnesses, anybody can bring anybody. But in general, you cannot bring just character witnesses. No judge is going to allow somebody to come and say, oh, Susie's such a good mom. You should give her child because she's such a good mom. So character witnesses are irrelevant in a family case. If you're going to have any witnesses, they're going to need to be fact witnesses. I've observed the father in exchanges with the child, and he's always screaming and cursing, and the child is always cowering in a corner when there's an exchange. So you can bring witnesses in that will talk about the things that they've observed.
Sure.
You can't talk about hearsay unless there's some sort of exception, which there can be. We generally will, when there's very heated, contested issues related to, so Florida doesn't actually have what we call custody in layman's terms. We have time sharing and we have parental responsibility. But generally, people will still call it custody. So the law changed back in 23, where before that, an unwed mother was the only guardian of a child. When the law changed, if there's a father listed on the birth certificate, he is now also equally a guardian of the child. So either parent now has literally the same rights. So if a father were to somehow take a child from the hospital and walk away, if he's on the birth certificate, he is completely allowed to do that because he now has the same exact rights as the moms used to have when they're unmarried. When they're married, they always had both. They both had the rights. And so whenever you're fighting over time sharing and parental responsibility, which is the ability to make decisions for your kids, you can bring in witnesses. But whenever they're very, very heavily contested or whenever there's allegations of abuse or neglect, you will ask the court to appoint a guardian ad litem. And a guardian ad litem tends to be an attorney but sometimes it can also be a mental health expert or a therapist, psychologist. And what this person is required by law to do is to do an investigation and come back to the court and make recommendations to the court. So the court
As
cannot,
like a neutral third party.
the court cannot just say, okay, well, what does the guardian think? Okay, that's what we're going to do. They are making recommendations. The court is required to take it, take the recommendation under advisement, take the law, take the testimony, evidence, whatever, and put it all together and then come out with a decision. But whenever there's issues with children, in Miami-Dade, it is very, very rare for, even in Broward, it is very rare for children to come to court and testify. Nobody wants to traumatize kids by having them come to court, talk to a judge, or talk in front of the parent that they're saying negative things about.
Right.
So typically a guardian is going to be what is going to be brought instead of, because the guardian will be able to talk to the child. Typically, whenever a guardian is appointed, the parties will agree to waive hearsay so that the guardian's report is able to say the child said X, the child said Y. They're also able to talk to the therapist. They're able to talk to the doctors, teachers. I mean, I've done guardian work, and it can get super involved depending on the issues. And you ask the parents, who do you want me to talk to? I want you to talk to la madrina. I want you to talk to the cousin. And you're like, okay, bring them to me. And then you will talk to them and then make those recommendations. So all of that is put together. You bring your witnesses, you bring in your evidence, things like text messages, videos, anything you can think of, really. If you can authenticate it, you can bring it to court. Financial records that are going to talk about any of the issues related to the finances of the family or the finances, child support, alimony, etc. You bring all that in, have your day in court, and then the judge makes a decision. As to, in a divorce, it's always going to be related to the kids. For child support, parental responsibility, time sharing, assets and debts, you're going to split those, tends to be generally equally. And then your alimony claims, whether somebody has a need and somebody has an ability to pay.
When that changed a little bit, right?
The alimonies change at the same time that the guardian rules for dads change in 23. The alimony rules change.
That's right.
We no longer have permanent alimony. We now only have durational alimony. Now there is a formula. So it's need and ability to pay, or the lesser of the difference between the parties' income. So it kind of like you have to kind of calculate both.
Right.
And then see which one gives you less money, and then that's the one that the court is supposed to use. Yeah, exactly. And then child support, which is going to be based on the party's income and the time sharing schedule, etc. And then when you have a paternity case, that's going to be your schedule, your parental responsibility, and your child support only, without the equitable distribution or the assets or the alimony.
Because no one filed the papelito.
No one filed the papelito. The papelito is really important.
The papelito
and it's incredible.
Sounds very important, guys.
It is. It's incredible and a little bit sad how many cases we see where people have been together for really, really long times, and often unfortunately our the gender stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason. In South Florida, generally it's going to be the mom that's going to have stayed home with the kids, the dad who's going to be the main breadwinner. So then what ends up happening is that dad has the credit and the income, so then the assets get put into dad's name. But then if you break up, now dad owns everything, and there's no alimony, there's no assistance, and all the assets are in dad's name because dad's income belongs to dad. In a marriage, any income earned by both parties belongs to the marriage and to both parties. But when they're not married, all the income belongs to the person who made it. So anything you bought with that income, anything that's in your name only, belongs only to you. And it's really sad and difficult to explain that, especially to women who have been with somebody 20, 30 years. And now you're like, yeah, so you got to move out of your house because it belongs to him. And you get no support. And your kids are now adults, so you don't get any child support. So you literally are like, good luck in life.
And it's the same thing on our side of, what
When
do you mean?
somebody
I've been
dies.
with him for 40 years, but my name is not on the house, but this is my house. This is where I live. I don't make any money. I'm 75 years old. And what do you mean the kids from the first marriage
Are kicking
want
me
me
out.
right? And there is no elective share here. There is no, oh, look, homestead rights. There is no.
It's like we got to
anything.
this age of liberation, like in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And we liberated ourselves from our rights. Ladies,
We're not enforcing them enough.
make
apparently.
make sure that there's a papelito if you're going to be with somebody long term. Or there are alternatives. There's estate planning, that you
Yeah.
can do to make sure that you're taking care of somebody. But the problem is that estate plans can change behind somebody's back.
All the time.
At the end of the day, I see this a lot when we advise the lesser spouse in a prenup, where I'm like, listen, I understand that you're maybe not going to make any requirements or changes in this prenup, and you're giving up all of the rights that the law gives and protects you. But here are the things you need to think about. And when you're in a more equal position, when you've bared his kids, when, things are happy, get some things in your name. Get some assets in your name. Get some jewels and register them to your name. Get the vacation house and register it to your name. Get a life insurance that you hold and pay for in his name, So there's other ways of protecting yourself, whether you're unmarried or, for estate planning purposes and for separation purposes. But we have to be smart about it. We have to think about it. We can't just assume that everything will be great, because there's literally zero protection for that unmarried couple when the more wealthy spouse passes away and the less wealthy spouse is like, oh crap.
Already horrible when, let's say, there is no estate planning, right? So there is no will, there is no anything, and now you're getting thrown out of your house because, well, the only heirs are his children, etc. But that's sometimes, I want to say it's about 50-50, that there actually is a will. Now, it might have been done a little while ago. It might have been done right after, you guys, whatever, been cohabitating. But that is so much more hurtful, because now there is some document that the kids, of course, have a copy of that
you
say,
got cut out
like,
of.
you're nowhere in, right? Like, it doesn't even mention you. And that's just, like, so devastating to people of, like, what do you mean?
You're
Like,
grieving your partner that you were happily with, theoretically, and then you're grieving your life, because now it's like a 180, and everything that you were used to now disappears. I mean, it's so important for people to really have that estate planning, and
it's amazing to me that
so
more
much
people
more
are
important.
not like more concerned about what their situation is going to be if, right? Like it's
And there's 50 ways to skin a cat. So okay, you don't want to get married. I got it. You had a bad divorce. She wiped you out the first time. But then make plans and ask, like, baby, if a bus hits you tomorrow, I'm nowhere, in this house, and I'm going to be homeless. Baby, do you want me to be homeless? Maybe a ladybird deed that protects you, if you unexpectedly die. But if you break up, then you could just put it back to your name. There's so many avenues that can help ensure that your loved ones are protected should you die, that can be undone if you just break up. So that's really something that, the listeners need to be aware of and need to think about.
very much so. And you touched on something else that happens, I think, less often in our world on the estate side, but every time it's such a crapshoot, which is the idea, and we've talked about this on this podcast with one of my associates, because we argue about things like this all the time. And in your world, child is born, dad is on the death certificate, right? You later find out, like, I don't know, you do 23andMe and you figure out that's not dad, that's not my kid. In family world, tell the audience how you just don't get to, like, storm out and not continue paying whatever child support you're paying or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, so everything that the family court does with kids is always going to be what is in the child's best interest. So if you signed off on that birth certificate and you listed yourself as the father, and you later on find out that you're not the father, unless you can replace yourself with the legitimate father, then
And I hope he has some income.
then at the end of the day, you may still be, in the same boat. So, it's so interesting to me how we will get, men come in, they broke up, it's a baby, maybe, a toddler, and they're like, but it's my kid. And I'm like, but do you know? Do you know it's your kid?
Se
And we
parece
hear
mi
about it.
abuela.
Dude, exactly. Oh, he has my uncle's eyes. Like, guy, like, everybody's got your uncle's eyes. He's Cuban. And everybody here is Cuban. Like, so you, not to discourage men from stepping up, but just trust but verify. When your kid is little and you haven't given this child the world. We also have situations where they know they're not the fathers, but they want to be the fathers, where they are the legal father, and then mom, they're separating, breaking up, divorcing, and now mom is like, but he's not the real dad. Like, too bad to say, you put them on the birth certificate, and they are refusing, which the law allows for them to refuse to be DNA'd. This is my child, and I am not interested in a DNA test. And if you
And
have...
Isn't that crazy? I feel like that is just crazy.
There's so many variations of sort of like similar pathways where there may or may not be, the correct dad and the legal dad.
Right.
Because maybe she had an affair and it was, somebody else's kid, but then they get back together and the legal husband is considered the legal dad because they're married. And
Right.
if legal husband is like, this is my kid, and I'm so sorry for, side hustle.
Baby daddy is not baby daddy.
The side baby daddy. If mom has not allowed that baby daddy to be in the child's life, he will literally have zero claims to this child. So, we've seen the law used to be very, very settled that baby daddy had zero rights. The law has evolved a little bit to account for situations where the dad was involved and then maybe mom decided, I don't want you, and then gets the husband to come in and help her out. So that now the law has evolved and that baby daddy may be able to come in and establish his rights. But at the end of the day, don't mess around with married women. Don't have babies with married women. Make sure that the babies belong to you. And don't threaten. We sometimes get, people who kind of threaten, well, I need a DNA test because I'm not sure it's my kid. And it's like a 15-year-old. Like, come on, guy. That's just, hurting your kid for no good reason.
Wow.
Because now you're just throwing mud to throw mud. And a child is in the middle. So ultimately, the court is always going to be trying to evaluate what is in the child's best interest. And it's not in the child's best interest to stay without a legal father. So you can't just ask to be taken off because you're not the father. If there isn't somebody to replace you, it's you, my friend. You've won the lottery.
Mm-hmm.
And
Congratulations, you are the father.
Congratulations.
You are the legal father.
Yes, congratulations. You are the legal father. So there's so much nuance there that it's created a lot of case law and a lot of, tough issues to deal with in family court.
On our side, what we have seen, and there's been an uptick of these, so I don't know, what podcast anybody has listened to that has given people ideas, because I swear that social media comes up with the most creative strategies. It's like they will admit in the petition saying, I know I'm not the actual child, but he always took care of me, and it's kind of like common law child now. Like, we cohabitated, he took care of me.
He was my fictive kin.
And he made it out to be my father.
Right.
And therefore, I should also be someone that inherits, right? And
common law
sometimes
adoption.
I'm the only one, right? I'm the only one that should inherit because a lot of times the people that are administering the state is actually not another child. It's like the sister
a cousin
or the whatever that is like, my brother didn't have any children. Who the fuck is this kid? And then when we tell them who's this kid, their reaction's literally like, oh my God. But there's this whole concept in Florida of if you have acknowledged in a writing, what that writing is up for a lot of interpretation according to these
birthday
judges and
card.
probate court.
Dear son,
Mija.
I love you.
I'm like,
I will love you and take care of you forever. Love, Dad.
we had it once, and that's what sparked a lot of arguments among me and one of my associates. We argue a lot, actually, because we differ in opinion a lot, and we're both very opinionated.
Interesting.
And the writing that we were talking about was a domestic violence court order from
Wow.
1970 something,
Where he called him dad and son, or dad and
beat up the deceased. It was the craziest thing. The 1970s, it really, it was both of them beat each other up kind of thing. But when you actually read through it, it was kind of like mom was more aggressive than,
boy.
than whatever. And deceased was dad. And in there, it mentions like all
Our
of the
son
children,
or our children.
Right? And
or-
of course, he signs one of these things. And like that is the evidence that's being presented as like,
Interesting.
I was like, are we for real right now? Are we for real? And in that case, Judge Fernandez here in Miami-Dade County, this is all public record, was not buying it. But lo and behold, not more than 6 or 7 months later, we got another case that was very similar, and it went in the totally different direction.
It's always about the specifics in your
very
case.
similar.
Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. In that case, since it didn't work, they then turned around and said, we believe we may be bio baby. Like we may be, like we didn't know, like our bad. We want to exhume the body. We want DNA.
Oh my goodness.
And by then, Judge Fernandez was over this little party. You know, he was like, really? No. You already said in a previous pleading that you were not, right? So we're not doing that. But it is interesting to me of how like this is common law adoption. And to me, those kind of gray areas concern me quite a bit. I don't like them.
Yeah.
I don't buy into this.
I mean, it's hard to advise your client and be like, listen, this is what's going to happen. And then, but, you know.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right.
Makes sense.
And so this whole intersection of bio dad and legal dad, and now there's bio baby and potentially common law baby. I don't know.
Common law baby.
We've coined a new term for the
We're
Florida
creating new
statutes.
laws right
We
here
are.
on the podcast.
Right here. I don't need Law and Order suing me either. I've already been sued like some freaking cat. So, well, I think we've covered all of the family law issues in this estate. Like I said, there's a million other issues in this estate that were not family law related. But whether it was like the common law marriage, the no evidence, you can get married at sea, but you actually need to file a papelito.
Yep.
If you're married somewhere else legitimately, in another country, you are married here.
Yeah.
You cannot be little bit married.
Don't be finding a Chilean wife and an American wife.
Yeah.
Until you divorce the Chilean wife.
Right. Again, like you can't be a little bit pregnant. You can't be a little bit married. Either you are still married or you are not married. Like those things don't really.
I say that to people all the time. Like in Florida, you're either married, getting divorced, or divorced. There's no, there's no separated. There's no, it's like you are married, you are getting divorced, like in the process with the papers filed in the court, or you are divorced. That's it. Those are the three.
That's right. That's right. Any last words other than you make sure you have your papelito people, for our fantastic podcast audience?
Make sure that, your marriages are valid. Make sure that if they're not, that you make them valid. And
Don't
make
trust
sure,
your alleged spouse. No.
make sure that, like I did, you get some estate planning done by the fabulous Leslie Marenco, because that is so important to protect you and your families while you're alive and while you're dead.
Oh, man. Great advice. I'm a little biased, but great advice. Well, that is all for today. I hope you had as much fun as we did. And remember, estate plans are not just for billionaires, but billionaires like Mr. Howard Hughes should get an estate plan too.
For sure.
Well, we will see you next time on Having Fun with Death and Taxes.